Hello and welcome to episode number 130 of the Cheesesteaks and Controllers podcast, presented, as always, by Fox PHL The Gambler, 102.5 FM, 1480 AM, and iHeartRadio. Plus, wherever you get your podcasts is where you're listening to this right now. If you are subscribed, thank you as always for doing that. And I hope you are having a great week, great April so far. April just started, and with the beginning of April marks a huge moment in the gaming industry, but in a different part of, I should say, it's a monumental moment for the gaming industry that involves a completely different industry, and we will get into that in the second segment of our show. Full review of the Super Mario Brothers movie coming in segment 2. Segment 3 is going to talk about how the film critic world dealt with the Super Mario movie, because some of those reviews are hysterical. And we're going to start the show off in the first segment with a good pal of mine, known him for a long time. Kyle Stallock is now the head of community for a company called Robot Cash, which is trying to do the online PC gaming marketplace thing, but using a technology that, has a bit of a reputation, be it good or bad, in blockchain. So he comes on to talk about what they're doing with blockchain and how they plan to kind of try to restore the good name of that technology through what they're doing. No, crypto involved, nothing like that. It's just being able to purchase games on their marketplace and then sell them back for credit, which can then be used on their marketplace again. So it's an interesting conversation. I suggest you give it a listen. And then in segments 2 and 3, it's all Super Mario Brothers movie. So let's get to it. All right, our next interview here on Cheesesteaks and Controllers, we're going to do something a little bit different. Normally we talk about games or hardware or sometimes tabletop when we talk about Magic the Gathering, but now we're going to talk about storefronts. You know about Steam, you know about Epic Games Store, Xbox, PlayStation. But this one is a little bit different, trying something a little bit different. They're going to allow you to sell your digital games back when you're done with them, thanks to the ever controversial blockchain technology. We've talked about blockchain here on the show before, specifically with Rechi Fizeme at episode 100. And the gentleman we have here is a good friend of mine for a long time. So I want to talk to him about what's going on with this and how that word might not be very scary as far as this program is concerned. Ladies and gentlemen, the head of community for Robot Cash, this is Kyle Stallock. Kyle, how are you?
I'm great. That's a great intro. Thank you so much, Jason.
Absolutely.
It's been a long time.
It has. It has been far too long. I hope things are well with you and yours. You're still in California.
LA, heart of LA, right next to Dodger Stadium, right next to a barcade. I'm living my dream, man.
Wow. There you go. If I'm ever in town for a Dodgers Phillies game, I'll come knock on the door.
Please do.
So this is Robot Cash, still in beta, as I understand it. Yes.
Yes, it is.
This is a digital storefront, that you would see anywhere else on the internet. PC games, I'm looking at Destroy All Humans, I'm looking at Ghost Runner, Wasteland 3 demos here, Darksiders Genesis, games that have come out in the last couple of years, and even games coming soon, WrestleQuest, which was a big part of PAX East for me, coming soon, and others like that. But the big hook here is the ability to sell them back. So walk me through how that works.
Magic, basically, of the blockchain. I'm actually talking to our founder a little bit more on those details, and I can have a more detailed explanation on our podcast that we have coming up soon. Plug there. But basically, the blockchain tech allows us to, as we know, keep track of authentication across different types of networks. Like I said, Magic. I'm not a tech guy. All I understand is that's what it does. Without the blockchain, this is something that wouldn't have really been made possible. I know that there's been a lot of controversy around NFTs, around blockchain, that type of thing. But you have to look at the utility of these objects, of the utility of the actual tech. And basically, it has never really allowed us to have this type of ownership before, especially with licenses. And as I'm sure you know very well, licenses in the digital front can be a very complicated thing.
Sure, they can. Wii U and 3DS eShop is a perfect example of such a thing.
It is. It is. And so that's one of the reasons that I came aboard this. You mentioned it's a storefront just like any other, and who hasn't complained these days of having too many storefronts, too many launchers on their
Yeah.
on their PC? We have I don't want to name all the competition and everything that's out there, but very well aware of that. And so yes, we are asking people to download something else, but we're doing something a little different. We're trying to give people the ability to sell the games like you mentioned that they didn't have before. Younger listeners might not remember a day when you could walk into GameStop and get, $5 for a game that you just recently bought, but not to disparage them.
The glory days.
The glory days. Exactly. And there's some utility for blockchain type of games. We are certainly open to those types out there. We want to make sure that we want to give people as much value as possible that they might not be encountering elsewhere. And we're not out to eat Steam's lunch or any of the major platforms. We're just trying to do our own thing.
Now, people are going to hear the term blockchain, the blurm talk chain. I almost said that. That's the mindset I'm in right now. The term blockchain, and get worried or suspicious.
Yes.
That word seems to carry a negative connotation that is earned thanks to stuff like NFT and crypto that we talked about before. But the more I research the core blockchain technology, I feel like if it's able to separate itself from those negatively impactful things, that technology could be something very beneficial to gaming or many other industries. So what would Robot Cash do to kind of help that separation? Like, how do you define yourselves as, yes, we're blockchain, but we're not like
not that blockchain.
We're not predatory. We're not trying to defraud anyone. This is supposed to be a place where you get more benefits than you normally would. Does that make sense?
Exactly. Yeah. What's the actual spiel, or like how are we not forgive me here for the BSing, I don't know if I can swear, but
No.
the audience.
This does get radio play, so I am
that's right.
Held by FCC requirements, unfortunately.
Yes. I'll not swear. I'll try. So I joined the company in November, and it had been a community-funded platform, which I found very interesting. But I had my own hesitancies to join something in this vein. There is a lot of bad juju in the gaming industry around this. So one of the things that drew me to it was the amount of percentage that we give to developers for every sale. It's 95%.
Wow.
It's the highest of any major digital gaming storefront out there, which is really great as someone who buys more indies than he probably should. It's something that I wanted to see us give back to the gaming industry in a really genuine way. So we are talking the talk and walking the walk in that aspect of it. And there's other things that we're planning to do on the marketing and community side to really showcase indie games a little bit better, helping the little guy stand out from the rest. As we all know, there's a lot of games coming out.
Yep.
How do you stand out on a storefront like the major ones that are out there? And it's hard to break through the noise. So we're working with some independent developers and some other major developers too to place our small bets on which ones we think are going to be good. We're not necessarily going to be a publisher, but we're entering into some interesting co-marketing agreements with them. And then also on the content side of things, I think what you're doing here is fantastic with this podcast, and thank you again for having me.
Sure.
We're going to start up some content on our own too that highlights exactly what we're talking about. So hopefully, we don't have the breadth of content, obviously, that the major platforms have. And one of the things that I would like to talk about too, if you don't mind me segueing here, is the difficulty. Is a difficulty in actually getting developers and publishers to buy into this, because everything you're saying we've heard from people left and right, and that's not an easy endeavor to do. So
okay, maybe he's not completely taking over. I did tell him that was something I wanted to ask in the pre-show. So you do have some notable publishers and developers here. THQ Nordic, because Destroy All Humans is here. A lot of good indie studios that I'm seeing here. Darksiders Genesis is Airship Syndicate. In Sound Mind, I believe, is Serenity Forge. I could be wrong about that, but I know they're...
Look at you.
I think could be wrong about that, but I'm not sure. Siberia 3, Siberia, I've been around for a while. Telltale is here as well. You've got some
Mhm.
good names here.
Mhm.
How much convincing did you need to do to get them to understand what you were trying to do here? And did that blockchain barrier come up in those discussions?
I'll say it does come up, and there are certainly publishers that they see the blockchain aspect and they smell, the current state of things. And I'll say this: NFTs did not do us any favors. The lack of utility around NFTs, I think, did blockchain dirty, and everyone in the space is trying to delete that from every announcement, piece of communication they
Yeah.
have. So the amount of communication, we don't have the user base that everyone has right now, so it has to be a situation with a lot of, and the BD team that might be listening to this when it goes live too, and they're like, oh, why do you say this? um but there is difficulty because like I said, the NFT, but also developers have to be in it with us, and the 95-5 split I has been very alluring for some publishers and developers. The co-marketing aspect of it, all that. And like I said, we don't have the user base yet, but to me, it's like I mentioned before, we were a community funded platform. Now, keep that in mind. Like, people actually invested in us and said, this is something I believe in. So I think it's going to take a combination of, your listeners, people out there, if they think that the industry needs something different where creators get more money, if they believe that they should have the right to sell their own games. Like, if you beat a game in a weekend and you wish to sell that on the Monday after, if you want that right, come aboard Robot Cash. Tell developers about us. I'm not trying to put the onus on consumers, but in a way, I believe consumers make the right decisions when they have the right information. And we are out here. We are a small startup. We're trying to do the best we can for gamers, and hopefully through our actions, people can judge for themselves if that's the case.
So let's talk about that
Yeah.
reselling games. That obviously is a big part of what you're hoping makes you attractive to future users, gamers, whatever they want to be called now. Uh,
Yep.
so how does that work? Like, I see you have a stash. That's the
Yep.
games that you have purchased. It tells you the last time you've played them and how long you've played them, or when you acquired them. So there are ways that you can sort these things. But how do you go about moving them? Is it person to person? Do you sell them back to the storefront? What is the currency being used here? Is there a proprietary currency plus, actual human currencies? How does that work?
Yeah, so we do have our own platform currency called Iron, which is not a cryptocurrency. Everyone thinks that because we're on the blockchain, it's automatically a
Yeah,
cryptocurrency.
that is almost an assumption I made as well. I made very careful not to say that, but
Well,
yeah,
appreciate that. Yeah, so when you sell your game, it basically gets slotted into an inventory of titles, and there's been a lot of asks of us if we can have a free marketplace type of things, because what if games get delisted? All of a sudden, my digital games are rare digital games.
hmm
That is certainly something that we love to hear, but it basically gets slotted into that, and so publishers get a little bit less than they would from a quote unquote use the game. There's a lot of terminology that we're figuring out that developers and publishers are comfortable with. Some don't like the idea of reselling because then it brings up again the stink of like GameStop and how they didn't get a cut of those resold games.
sure.
So yeah, it gets thrown into like a lump sum of titles, and if yours gets picked, kind of it gets you get it sold, and you get a portion of that profits too from that. So you can use that money, to whatever you want. If you choose to get a cash out of cash, totally fine. We allow that. If you want to get platform currency, you can do that as well. And that platform currency can be earned by setting your computer to idle. We don't like the term mining. It's something that everyone has negative connotations with too. But we are entering into agreements that if the computing power that we use from people earning iron can be used to solve research for the betterment of humanity type thing. So we're looking at how can we better people on every front of our business, and hopefully that removes the negative connotations, like I said, that we have with everything else.
Are you fixing world hunger? Like that what kind of what sort of like when you say that,
Yeah.
how does I don't want to use the term either, generating currency by taking your computer idle.
Yeah.
Are you trying to figure out like more environmentally friendly ways? Are you like what is the goal, I guess, of that research? What are you trying to find?
Yeah, there's lots of places out there right now that you can use your PC power to do things like that. So
Mhm.
we're certainly not the only ones entering into the space. Remember on the I think was it PS3 that we could use folding at home for like was it SETI? I think that we could do. It was some we could
It does
use
sound
folding
vaguely
it.
familiar, yes.
Yeah, and it basically turned your PS3 on fire, and it was overclocked and all that stuff. I'm
Yes.
not actually overclocked, but yeah. So we do that type of thing. But we because you are putting it to work, you're using your electricity and all this. There are places out there that are using that type of computing power at scale to solve complex problems, and doing so, you get kind of some currency or you'll get something back. We want to combine those separate services and make it a one-stop shop for gamers, so that whenever, like, I have my computer doing it all the time, even though I'm a part of the platform. I have it to idle only, so I'll walk away from my computer, go for a walk, I'll come back, and then I have a few currency mined for the platform. It's great. It makes me feel good about using up the electricity for that type of thing.
Now you're sending like usage data to those other places. Is that the trade off there? Like when I obviously if I'm setting my computer to idle,
Yeah.
I'm generating currency for myself.
Yep.
You are looking at how much currency I've generated, at how much power I've used. What part of that data is what is enticing to you?
It's so it's not, you're not generating the currency. We're basically giving you currency in exchange for the
Oh, I
computing
see.
power.
You're
Yeah,
quote unquote paying us for our time, our
exactly.
idle
That's a
time.
great way of saying it. Yeah.
Okay.
And we want to
Okay.
do that, like I said, to add value to gamers, because we found, and this is very transparent, that there are gamers in different parts of the country that necessarily can't afford the games that maybe you and I can, first world country type thing. So we're giving them an opportunity to take maybe the graphics card or the computers they have and generate some additional value for it. And this was also born out of the fact that, I mean, people, the graphics cards we have now, they have surpassed anything that I would have dreamed capable of.
Hmm.
But the problem is you spend $1,000 these days, $1,500, even $2,000 on an expensive graphics card. What do you do with it after? And so we're trying to add additional value for gamers in that aspect of it. So, you can justify it to whatever family member that you need to justify it to say that
Sure.
$2,000 thing is paying off.
Yeah. So I guess my last question is, what do you see right now as Robot Cash's biggest hurdle as you continue your beta test? I don't know when your plans are to go 1.0, but at
Yeah,
some point in the future, you're going to want to do that. What stands between Robot Cash now, in your opinion, and
yeah.
Robot Cash where it wants to be in 6, 12, 18 months?
I think with any type of business like this, there are inherent gambles, right? We
Yep.
are going up against Steam, and as someone who has a Dota tattoo on his hand and 3,000 games in his library, I'm a fan. But how do you change habits of gamers like that? Is there a need for buying and reselling? As someone who likes to collect things, I like to collect, and I also like to sell things too. I think there is some really interesting aspects that we could do with the blockchain tech in terms of rarity. But to me, it's all about consumer interest. It's a hard time for any industry right now to come about with the recession, and we don't know where that's going to take us. We don't know consumer buy-in for blockchain and all that, but I do have a lot of hope in that. Like I said, we were community funded, and there has been a lot of interest about this, and a lot of, I guess, OG gamers like yourself. I I think this is a validator a little bit. You're not a guy who would let anyone on this podcast, so I feel a
No.
little pat on the back right now. But yeah, I think that's the problem. And if I can get even more detailed, it's games. If consumers think, again, this is more of a call to action, but if consumers really think that this is something that they want to buy into, tell developers, publishers, come over here, get 95% of the take from every sale versus I'm not going to say any of the platforms, but some of them you only get 50%. Do you want 50% or do you want 95%?
Yeah.
It's up to the industry to decide.
So there you have it. That is Robot Cash. This is the head of their community, Kyle Stallock. If you are interested, robotcache.com, ROBOTCACHE. Check out the library, make an account, see if it's something that you want to pursue. Let them know. Obviously, he's the head of the community, so he's going to get your feedback and pass it over to the team. And we'll see what happens. I like what I'm seeing so far, though, Kyle. I think this could be something pretty cool. And 95%, if I ever make a game, that sounds pretty good to me, too. But all right, Kyle Stallock, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you coming on and talk to me about Robot Cash. Hopefully, the next time we talk, we'll be talking about 1.0 and bigger and better things. Kyle, thanks for so much.
Thank you so much.
Coming up after the break, my full review of the Super Mario Brothers movie, which I saw Wednesday night on opening night. And, well, we'll talk about it next segment. Stick around. All right, welcome back to Cheese, Steaks, and Controllers, episode number 130. Thank you again to Kyle Stallock jumping on here, talking about Robot Cash. Had a chance to mess around with it a little bit, downloaded some games. Haven't resold any back yet, so I'm not sure how that works. But so far, it seems to be a very good marketplace and a good spot to get some games you might not have already played before, or some that might not have been on your radar. So I do recommend that you give it a look. But now we are going to talk about something that I have wanted for basically my entire life, that I got in 1993, that I immediately had to forget about, and now it's back the way we all envisioned it. Let's talk about the Super Mario Brothers movie. It is a fun movie. Straight up. Let's just start there. So, Super Mario Brothers movie was made by Illumination in partnership with Nintendo. Illumination, obviously the studio behind the Minions, Despicable Me, other stuff like that. At first glance, it is a kid's movie. It moves hyper fast. The entire movie takes place in about an hour and a half. There are silly parts. There are parts where they explain the plot super duper duper fast. There are parts where you're just like, that doesn't quite make sense. And some parts that start out a little cringy, but then very quickly become charming and funny. And let me just say straight up out of the gate, I really enjoyed this movie. As a long-time Mario fan, Super Mario Brothers, one of the first video games I ever played, just like I'm not alone in that. A lot of people can say that. The care they put into each of these characters and how their personas translate from the games they come from is pretty awesome. There's the definite attention to detail here that's apparent throughout the film for old heads like me to pick up on, whether it's the whole reason Bowser is doing what he's doing. That's unbelievably consistent. As weird as it is definitely consistent with his character. Anyone who's played Super Mario Odyssey can attest to that. To the Easter eggs, my goodness, let's start there. So the amount of Easter eggs contained within this film is astounding. Some of them are obvious, like the restaurant that they're in the beginning of the movie is a very obvious reference to a classic Nintendo franchise, from the name and the logo on the window to the pictures on the wall. Anyone who has ever played Nintendo knows that franchise and frankly would like it to come back, but that's another story. So seeing that was very cool, but then it's little things, right? There's a part where we're in Mario's Brooklyn bedroom and he's playing Kid Icarus, which is, right in front of your face. But above his TV is an R-Wing. An R-Wing is hanging so you can see the ship from Star Fox. There are posters on his wall. One of them has the polar bear from Ice Climbers, right? Little nuanced things like that are all over this movie, and it is a ton of fun trying to find them, being someone who, like I said, has played these games forever and knows what these references are. that being said, as far as a movie experience, I did enjoy it too. Like I said in the very beginning, it's obviously a kid's film. If you went into this, and we'll talk about this in the third segment, if you went into this with the mindset of like you're expecting an Oscar caliber film, I don't know what to tell you. It's just it's a fun little romp for kids that has a lot of things for older adults that have played Mario to pick up on. Case in point, my kids had a lot of fun. There are some parts that get a little scary. They covered their eyes and held their ears, which is to be expected. The part where Luigi first gets lost, he's in a barren forest with no leaves, and he's got dry bones coming after him. It's intense, it's scary, and if your kid doesn't like the scary stuff, that might unnerve them, but it's immediately allayed by more lighthearted sort of comedy elements to bring the mood back. It doesn't stay in those scary moments for too long. Honestly, it doesn't stay in any moments for very long. It's a very fast-moving sort of film, sort of story. Very little exposition, and what exposition is there is super fast. Like, I feel like Princess Peach in particular, there are a lot of questions around her in general. All they tell you is that she came through the same sort of pipe that Mario and Luigi came through, but as a baby, and eventually just earned her way to be the princess of the kingdom. But I don't know, that just leaves there's a lot open there, I guess, to explore in a second or even a third movie. They do tease a follow-up film through post-credit scenes. One in particular, after all of the credits, is a specific and pretty obvious tease as to where they might be going in the next film. I also like that they gave that character a bit of a reference, showed them earlier in the film, but then to get a definite reference at the end there was kind of cool. A lot of criticism has been made, or a lot of talk has been said about the voice cast, how some of them are not as convincing as others, and I would tend to agree with some of them. Jack Black as Bowser is perfect, and anyone who says otherwise just did not watch the same film that I did. Luigi as Charlie Day as Luigi, is awesome. Anya Taylor-Joy as Peach is great. Keegan-Michael Key as Toad is perfect. Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong. This one people seem to be on the fence about. Some are very vehemently against it. Some are for it. I think he did a good job. And that's where I lay. I think he really embodied Donkey Kong very well. And the fact that they got the Seth Rogen laugh in there as part of Donkey Kong's character was very, very funny to me. I appreciated that little attention to detail. I also liked how Fred Armisen performed Cranky Kong. I thought that was really good. And whoever voiced that Luma in the dungeon, the nihilistic, super depressed Luma, was perfect. That was hysterical. I loved every time that Luma was on screen, and I hope that there's more of that in a second movie as they go into the heavily teased galaxies. But the one voice that everyone's going to talk about is Chris Pratt as Mario, because the internet likes to hate on Chris Pratt, deservedly so for the most part, but they like to give Chris Pratt crap. And secondly, the trailers leading up to this, he hadn't really established whether he was going to be convincing Mario or not. And we didn't really have a lot to go off of in original Mario games. And I talked about this before. Charles Martinet, love the guy. Love how they implemented him in this movie, too. Perfect casting for him if he wasn't going to be Mario. But that Mario voice, as distinct as it is, and as, iconic as it is, would it hold for a 90-minute movie? And I was not convinced that it would. I think Chris Pratt's take was, let's say, serviceable for a 90-minute movie. There were times where it just sounded like Chris Pratt trying to do a Brooklyn accent, and there were times where it sounded like Mario's voice, the voice that you would expect Mario to have. were there parts where I wished he could have done a little bit more? Sure, absolutely. But I don't think he was the disaster that many folks expected him to be when his face was shown on that first Nintendo Direct, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago now almost. I thought he did a fine job. I thought it could have been a lot worse, but I definitely think he did a good job. I like how the film incorporated multiple parts of the Mario franchise, like bringing in the Kongs. I thought was a very good idea. You can explore that part of Mario lore because technically they did start together. Mario was part of Donkey Kong, and then they split off to do their own thing. It also allows for a future Donkey Kong film if they decide to go that route. Donkey Kong Country would be pretty cool. They showed Diddy, they showed Dixie, they show Chunky, I think it was. So there are we've seen these Kongs now. We know that they're there. They even make it a point to specifically call out Diddy Kong. So it's almost like they're saying this is something we might explore in future movies. Be ready for it. And I'm down for that. If they want to, I have a feeling they're basically just building towards like a Smash Brothers-esque cinematic universe because that's what everybody's doing now. Nintendo gets a bunch of characters together for one big movie, that sort of thing. I'm not exactly sure how they're going to implement outside of Mario and Donkey Kong at the moment. Are we going to get an animated Zelda film? If we're worried about Chris Pratt as Mario, who's going to voice Link, who traditionally has no voice? Can we just sign Matthew Gafford to do the Star Fox film? Because if you haven't watched A Fox in Space, you should do that. Some of the best content on YouTube, but I digress. The Super Mario Brothers movie, in summation. Oh, one more thing. Huge thing. Almost forgot to talk about it. The soundtrack of this film is incredible. It's my favorite part of the movie. There were multiple parts in this film where a familiar tune would suddenly surface from the background orchestrations, and it would give me goosebumps, chills. When they first land on Rainbow Road, which you've seen from the trailers, that's a big one. There's a part where Peach goes through the obstacle course to show Mario how it's done. When she finishes and she gets to the end, that was a big one. I still get chills from that one, and I've seen that clip on YouTube multiple times, but seeing it in the theater and hearing that orchestration, oh man, so good. There's a bunch like that. Little melodies or little familiar things will pop out of the music from time to time and just really hit the spot, if you're asking me. So Brian Tyler crushed it. He crushed the soundtrack. I hope he continues to work with it. His ability to make his own unique signature and incorporate all these classic tunes within it is flawless, and he deserves every accolade he gets. Jeff Keighley, if you're listening to this ever, and you need someone to perform some special music at the Game Awards this year, you should be on the phone with Brian Tyler tomorrow because it is phenomenal. But enough of that. In summary, wrapping this whole thing up, I really liked the Super Mario Brothers movie for what it is. I did not go in thinking it was going to be a trailblazing film and set a new standard for children's movies and animated movies and all this other stuff. It's not what I expected. And anybody who did is foolish, to be frank. I expected to sit down for 90 minutes to 2 hours, eat some popcorn with a smile on my face, and have fun watching a movie about a video game that I've been playing since I was 3. One that I now share with my daughters. And that's exactly what happened. It was funny. It was tense. It was light and upbeat. Every character gets enough screen time, makes me laugh. Bowser in particular, Jack Black again nailed it, and to see Bowser playing a grand piano in this like love ballad. I'm not going to get into it too much for those who haven't seen it yet, but it's phenomenal. I liked it. I really liked the way that they did this. You can tell that Shigeru Miyamoto was, hand in hand with the directors and the creators of this film every step of the way. His influence is very much in here. And I don't think the film would have been as enjoyable had he not been part of it. So I do appreciate his input. I appreciate that his name gets top billing right there with the head of Illumination, whose name is it Meledendry, I think? I always want to say Melisandre, but that's the Red Witch from Game of Thrones. I think it's Meledendry. But yeah, I really liked it. If you're looking for something fun and light and upbeat to sit in the theater for a little while and watch, this is a great movie to do that with. And I am looking forward to see what Nintendo and Illumination do with future movies, since there are definitely some seeds planted for things to go that route. So Super Mario Brothers movie, A-OK in my book, finale approved. Definitely go check it out if you like Mario, if you have kids, or if you have kids that like Mario. It will appeal to everyone, and it's a fun night, fun day at the movies for you and your family. But coming up after the break, we're going to get into some of the reviews of this movie, because a lot of people just simply did not understand the assignment, and if I'm being honest, it makes me laugh. Stick around. All right, welcome back to Cheesesteaks and Controllers, episode number 130. Just got done my review of the Super Mario Brothers movie, and now we're going to talk about other reviews of the Super Mario Brothers movie. Now, I, as a fellow critic, albeit for video games, not film, I understand how difficult it is to be a reviewer sometimes. You catch a lot of crap for things that are basically just your opinion. I get it. I do. And I do not begrudge any of the people that I am about to reference in their review process. But my issue comes with the outlets themselves. You would think that they would send a critic with a little more background into video games in general, let alone Mario. Like, you have some critics who are talking about, the Game Boy in their reviews as if it's still a current console that people play. One review in particular, from, CTV News, said, "The Super Mario Brothers movie has all the charm of an unplugged Game Boy." Oh, good for you. You referenced a 40-year-old game console in your review. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for coming in with an open mind. And then you have people who, there's one review that I read, the very first line of this review is, "I am not the target audience for the Super Mario Brothers movie." Then what are you doing reviewing it? If you're not the target audience, then what? That doesn't make sense to me. I'm not saying you have to have full knowledge of every single film or game or whatever that you're reviewing. You don't. But I feel like there needs to be some sort of modicum of, whether it's research or understanding of basic subject source material. This does not apply to every film that you're ever going to review. A lot of these are brand new IP that you're sitting in and learning about for the first time. And it's the movie's job to fill in every relevant detail to you. I understand that. But when you're tasked with reviewing something like this, something like the Super Mario Brothers movie, I don't think it's out of the realm of expectation, is the word I'm looking for, to have a little background on what's going on here. So, like, the New York Post's review says, "All the characters make moronic comments that aren't funny enough to be called jokes. The princess, who isn't exactly a Mensa candidate either," I'm not sure why that's relevant, says, "There's a huge universe out there with a lot of galaxies." That's not her being dumb. If you had done any research whatsoever, you would know that the word galaxies holds a lot of weight in the Mario universe. There were 2 games called Mario Galaxy where all you did was ship across space and go to different galaxies. That's why they're saying that. That, plus the Luma in the cage, are teasing the future of the franchise. I don't think it's out of the realm of expectation for a critic to know that going in, whether they play games or not, because it's not hard to look up. Super Mario franchise. If this critic hadn't played Mario since, Mario 3 on the NES, or even the original Mario back when it was an arcade machine, fine. That's fine. Go to Wikipedia. What games have come out in the Mario franchise since 1985? And you'll see 2007, Galaxy. 2010, Galaxy 2. So then when she says there's a lot of galaxies, you think, oh, maybe that's where they're going. And maybe my slant on this is biased, right? Or at least influenced by the fact that I have the background knowledge and have established that background knowledge for, however long I've been playing video games, coming on 40 years here. But if I was reviewing something in an established franchise for video games, and I had not played the first game, let's say, and I was reviewing a sequel, or I hadn't played it for a long time, I would get all the background information I needed before I jumped in. I just feel like that's something a critic should do. So to read this line in the New York Post about basically complaining that they said huge universe with a lot of galaxies and not knowing that word's weight, that is less forgivable for me than someone who doesn't know what Ice Climbers is, so they don't recognize that polar bear on the poster, or why Foreman Spike is not an original character in this movie and he is established in a, albeit, niche or what's the word I'm looking for? Retro, sort of unknown game. Wrecking Crew exists. He existed before. I would not expect the non-gamer to know that he that he existed before the movie, excuse me. And if they, they think he's original, that is a misconception I can understand, right? Even like I said earlier, you do your research before you go into this film. If I Googled Super Mario, or if I went to Wikipedia for Super Mario franchise and stopped at the core games, the Wikipedia for Super Mario franchise may list that Mario appeared in Wrecking Crew, but even that's not going to tell you who Foreman Spike is. So if you don't know, if you do ancillary research and you don't land on Foreman Spike being a previously established character, fine. But not knowing galaxies, that line to me is very indicative of, the kind of lack of research that some of these reviews fall into. Of course, this guy from the New York Post goes on to talk about how Detective Pikachu was a fun take, Sonic the Hedgehog was solid, Dungeons and Dragons, which is out now. But, saying that Super Mario is not as horrible as the Emoji Movie, I appreciate that. But he called it, dumb. The fact that he doesn't know what galaxies, I got to get away from that one. A different one, I don't know why. Why am I going to RogerEbert.com for a review on the Super Mario Brothers movie? Why am I doing this to myself? I know what's coming. But it's your typical, I played Mario in the 80s, and this movie does not translate to me because it's not the same as it was in the 80s. This would even go so far as to say that ChatGPT produced it after data and imagery from the games were fed into a computer. That, come on, man. And then Vulture, another one, we're still pretty bad at video game movies. No, we're not. This is exactly the kind of introductory film you want for a game franchise. And this one even references Doom. Of all the video game movies to source, you talk about Doom. I don't know. I don't know what I expected. I don't know why I thought that maybe film critics would understand it. It's just not the kind of movie that they typically. I mean, come on, it's a kids' movie. I get that. They apparently get that. 54% on Rotten Tomatoes for the official critic tomatometer or whatever they call it, compared to a 96% fan audience score, which is exactly kind of what I expected. This is not an Oscar-winning film, a winning film for story, or, it's not going to be nominated for Best Picture. It may get some love for the score, for the soundtrack, and the animation perhaps as well, but I'm not. I never expected it to be a top billing sort of Oscar film, but these people are going into it like it is, and that to me doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I feel like I understand that you're critiquing a film based on, multiple different elements, but you can't, maybe it's just me. Maybe this is why I'm not a film critic. Maybe this is why I'm a game critic. But I feel like there need to be some concessions made when you're going into a kid's movie. Expecting a Oscar caliber plot from a 90-minute kids film just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, if you ask me. Now, I could be overthinking this, but I don't know. I had more time smiling and having fun than thinking about the specific nuances of the character development of Mario and Peach. I get they have to think about that, but also it's not the kind of movie that really requires it, if that makes sense. I don't know. Some of these reviews just made me really laugh for how serious they tried to take a Super Mario Brothers movie. And at the end of the day, it was just a fun kids film that made me smile, and maybe they should have tried to smile too. One of the funniest parts, actually, the funniest parts of this is the AP, Associated Press. Their critic quoted T.S. Eliot at the front of their review, and for some reason, that's the part the tweet picked up. So it's like this really poetic line go above a picture of Mario and Luigi fist bumping in the tweet, and it's really funny. And they saw it. They said this was a bug. It was supposed to pick up a different line, but we're not deleting the tweet because it's awesome. And I agree, it was very funny. So a lot of folks had fun with it. Some folks missed the point, if you ask me. That one with the galaxies in New York Post, just come on, man. Any basic research will give you that answer as to why she says it like that. Could it have been written better? Sure, but that doesn't make the line dumb. There's a reason for it. I should not, I understand, I should not be criticizing other critics. It's a tough job. They catch enough crap as it is. But if you're going to come into the games realm, come prepared. That's all I ask. Do a little bit of research before you come into this film. You can come in blind to what happens in the film, but don't come in blind to the entire 35-plus year franchise. There are details out there that you can look into without, spoiling everything about this movie. And I wish more outlets had done it. That's it. That's all. But, if you're going to see the movie this weekend, let me know what you think about it at Big Man Finelli on Twitter. I really do want to hear your thoughts on it, see if you jive with me or if you have other feelings about what you saw on the screen. I had a lot of fun, and I honestly think you will too. And if you go to AMC, get the question block popcorn tin, because that thing is super cool, sitting on my desk right now, and I'm probably going to fill it with stuff. So with that is the end of episode 130 of the Cheesesteaks and Controllers podcast, presented by Fox PHL The Gambler, 102.5 FM, 1480 AM, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts is where you can hear my voice. As I always say every single week, if you're listening to these words at the end of the show, that means you've made it to the end, and I fully appreciate you spending an hour of your day listening to me drone on about video games and movies and the critics who criticize the video game movie, especially this week. It really means a lot to me that you listen to the show and listen to me talk, and I hope that I continue to entertain, educate, and whatever else in the future. If you want something different from me, this past week I had the opportunity to open some Magic the Gathering March of the Machine boosters. New set drops April 21st. I was able to get some early samples from Wizards of the Coast, put that up on my YouTube page. If you search for Jason Finelli Magic the Gathering, it should come up. Those cards ended up being pretty cool. Makes me excited for the set on the 21st of April. If you're not into Magic the Gathering, though, I have some new stuff on MMORPG coming out soon from PAX East, and then a couple of reviews in the pipeline that will be out shortly. One that I just did for Everspace 2, that's a lot of fun. I would check that out if you have the chance. But there are always stuff coming from me, GameSpot, MMO, and the good things. So go check those out when you have a chance. But as I say every single week, I hope you have a fantastic weekend. I hope you have a great week right behind it. And we will be back next week with more of the latest and greatest in video games here on Cheesesteaks and Controllers. Bye-bye.